Hi there. Thank you for joining me for the Daily Word. I'm John. I get to be one of the pastors here at Redeemer. And if this is the first time you're watching this, thank you so much for joining me. If you watch every day or almost every day or close to that, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Let us also leave a comment. Let me know if this is helpful for you. And also let me know where you're watching this from. Just encouraging to see people really all over the world watching this with us every day. So I'm in 2 Corinthians today, and I got my notes, got my Bible, so let's jump in. Now I want to give you a little background since we're starting the book. Paul wrote more words to the Corinthian church than to any other church or individual in the New Testament. So this was a significant church, and the Spirit knew that the situations that they were facing would be very similar ones to what we face today. So Corinth was one of the major cities in the Roman Empire for things like transportation, trade, culture, immigration, prosperity, sports, and religion. They had the Isthmian Games, which was only rivaled by the Olympics, and it was kind of a little Rome, even in sin and depravity. Above the city, there was an Acropolis with a temple and to Aphrodite, and its hundreds of temple prostitutes would come down every night into the city and fill Corinth with moral corruption and decadence. It was considered really the most debased city in all the Roman Empire. So think of a place, I don't know, like Amsterdam or Las Vegas or something like that. All of this, though, makes Corinth a strategic center for gospel ministry. Paul, if you notice, he chooses some of, if not the very biggest, most influential cities in the Roman Empire to evangelize. So he starts this church in Acts 18 after preaching the gospel. This happens somewhere around 51 AD. He writes 1 Corinthians to this church around 56 AD. He likely visits the church in that same year, and then he writes 2 Corinthians after his visit and after writing a letter we don't have to them, all to try to repair their relationship. 2 Corinthians is Paul's expression of relief that things are okay in their relationship now, but he's also writing to warn them that false teachers are attacking him in an attempt to turn them against him. So in order to create a platform for themselves, these false teachers decided to attack Paul, a faithful teacher. And isn't that how it goes? So they said things like he had no conviction, he was a dictator, his gospel is false, he sought to destroy people, not help them, he was a coward, he was collecting all that money for himself, not to help Christians in need. So as you hear him say various things throughout this book, he's answering most likely the attacks that he is receiving from these false teachers. So in general, he writes to defend his ministry from these false teachers, and he writes to encourage the church to continue to give to help the saints in Jerusalem who are suffering, which is something we talked about in yesterday's Daily Word. So Paul starts with his regular greeting and then moves right into the letter. And so the very beginning we'll call comfort in affliction. So which gives right at the beginning this counsel that you and I need. This is counsel that we need to counsel ourselves with when we go through hard times, that God, notice verse 4, that God who comforts us in all our afflictions. Why? So that we may be able to comfort those who are in affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Translation, the lessons, the counsel, the comfort that God gives you in your trials are meant for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is so that you will take that help, that comfort, that counsel that you received and help someone else with it. Look at verse 6. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. How often do we think of that? We often think I'm afflicted because of something I did. I'm afflicted because of sin in my life. And he's saying, no, it's just the opposite of that. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. So it is, remember Job? You often think, Job is trying to figure out why he's suffering. We know the answer. He's suffering because he is righteous. And so often it is not worth trying to figure out all the different details within suffering. We can see in Job, he suffered for his righteousness. We see here, he's saying, Christians, we suffer so that we can take the help that we received and help someone else with it. So in verses 8 to 11, Paul informs the church that he had just what he had just gone through, such a massive trial. He wondered, it was so bad, he wondered if he would even live through it, which then moves to section number 2, which is convictions in ministry, verses 12 to verse 24. So Paul is saying in this section, he's always conducted himself with integrity towards this church. His conscience is clear that he has not sinned against them at all. He was hoping to visit them again someday. He was actually going to come to them, but his plans had to change. And the false teachers likely jumped on this to say, you can't trust this God. He makes plans and then he changes his mind. He explains, no, that he was not being untrustworthy, and everyone will know that when they stand before Jesus. In fact, though, it was because he trusted them to understand that he had to change their plans. He trusted that they would get it, that they would understand. I mean, to have that kind of believing the best and choosing to trust amongst Christians in their churches, amongst Christians and their other family and friends, amongst Christians and their pastors, that we would believe the best, that we would choose to trust, that love covers a multitude of sins, and if there's anything that we just can't get past, that we would go speak to those people. That would be amazing to have that kind of trust amongst us. His point is that because God is faithful, we are to be faithful, and that is what he's been, so he can be trusted. Also, if he visited them at the time that the false teachers were saying, oh, you can't trust him, if he visited them at that time, verse 23, it would not have been good. He would have been there to rebuke them. But he was patient with them. He gave them room to change after multiple letters and even a visit, which they eventually did change, and they did change because they stood firm in their trust in Christ. So that begins 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Thank you for joining me for the Daily Word, and thank you for your comments and your kind words about this ministry in the comments. It's really helpful because we don't know who's watching and if this is helpful, so it's so good to hear from all of you. So thank you for doing that. Take care. Love you.